Hey everyone, Dennis Porter here with the new and greatly improved Material Manager tool for Maya. It's been about a year since my last update, and I'm happy to say that this new version, version 5, has a lot of new features and bug fixes compared to version 4. I also want to mention that the code has also been completely rewritten from scratch, which should make it a lot easier to read and modify if you're into that sort of thing. But before I talk about all that, let's first go over how to install the tool. Inside the zip file, you should see 5 items. The first one is a Material Manager folder, which holds all the icons for the tool. The next item is the actual Mel script that runs the tool. 2 config files, and then installation instructions, which basically goes over what I'm talking about now. For installation, you're going to want to go to your Documents directory, and then find Maya. And then inside Maya, you're going to just pick whichever version of Maya that you're using. This script is compatible from 2013 all the way up to present, and even future versions that haven't been released yet should be compatible. And from here, just pick whichever folder that corresponds to the version of Maya that you have. For me, I'm using 2016 extension 2, so I'm going to do 2016.5. And an important thing to note here is that there's a scripts folder right under the version folder. This is not the folder that you're going to be using. You're actually going to be going inside the prefs folder. And then there's a scripts folder there. This is where you're going to be installing the Mel script. The icons will go into the icons directory. You can see here I already have a folder for it. So I'm just going to copy this file path from my browser. Back in the zip file, I'm going to select the Material Manager folder. I'm going to extract that. I'm going to paste that file path into the icons folder. Press OK. I'm going to override it because it's already installed for me. And then back in my browser, I'm going to go one step up to the prefs directory and then into the scripts directory. I'm going to copy this file path back to my zip file. I'm going to take materialmanager.mel and the 2 files, text files, and I'm going to extract those into that scripts directory. And click OK. Overwrite because it's already installed for me. Now we need to write in a little bit of code to get the window to open. If you had Maya open while you installed the files, you're going to need to close Maya and reopen it. Once that's done, you can go down to the Mel command line down here. You can type in source space dp underscore lowercase material uppercase manager, no spaces, semicolon, and then lowercase material uppercase manager, again one word, no spaces, semicolon, and then press enter. Once this window comes up, I would recommend going to the Tools menu and just immediately creating a shelf button. That way you don't have to write that code in ever again. Now we have a toggle button in our shelf. One more quick thing before I get into going over the other tools and features. This version of Material Manager comes with an mm_config.txt file. You can customize these values based on whether or not you want certain settings to be toggled on or off when you run up the Material Manager. The config file drives the settings that you see under the sorting, bonus tools, and dock menu. So you're able to control things like where the window will appear when you open it for the first time, any of these visibility settings, and sorting settings. Also, the config file has instructions at the top on how to use it. Alright, so I'm just going to briefly cover the UI and some of the lesser used tools, and then later on in the video I'm going to cover some of the more frequently used tools. Up at the top we've got the menu bar. We'll just go over each one of these menus. Under tools we have pretty much all the tools that you can find elsewhere in the Material Manager. You can see that the icons here correspond with other icons located in the tools area down below. There are some options that can only be found in this menu, such as opening the node editor in the hypershade, as well as creating a shelf button and binding a hotkey. If you click on this icon adjacent to the menu item, it'll bring up a little help window to explain sort of what that tool does. The help text actually replaces the material list, so whenever you click OK, you'll get all that information back. Under the sorting menu, you have different options for how the materials actually show up in the list. So by default, it's set to alphabetical. If you wanted chronological, you can set it to that. If you wanted your assigned materials to show up to the top of the list always, you can turn that on. This next option, snap to top with one material. This option only works with the above option of sorting assigned materials first. So what snapping to the top with one material does is when you select a material out of the material list, it's going to snap the scroll bar all the way to the top so it's always in view. If you don't want it to do this, you can simply uncheck that option, and next time you select a material, your scroll bar will remain where it's at, even though the material gets sorted to the top of the list. Clear all material markers, that's simply going to take your markers here, if you have any, and it's going to clear them. And then reset all sorting and search filters. This resets all of these options in this menu back to their default state. Under the cleanup menu, we have some options for automatically renaming or deleting objects in your scene. First one here, remove unused materials and shading groups. This is going to look for any material that's not assigned to an object and delete it out of the scene. This next one, remove unused utility and file nodes. This will look for any of those types of nodes that aren't attached to a material, and it's going to remove those from the scene. As long as a node is connected to a material, regardless of whether or not that material is assigned to something, it won't be deleted. The purge scene option is just going to remove all materials and utilities from the scene. Doesn't matter if they're assigned to anything or connected, they're just all going to be deleted. So it basically just clears out your entire scene. I'm actually going to do that now. And this is on undo history, so if you accidentally press this button for some reason, you can always undo and get everything back. But for now, I'm actually going to keep my scene purged. This option here, relate file utility and shading engine names, I'll talk about that in a little bit. Add M prefix to existing materials. This will go through all of your materials and it will add an M prefix to the name. So let me actually undo to get all my materials back. And down here at the bottom you can see that there are some materials that do not have this M prefix. So if I go up to cleanup and choose add M prefix to existing materials, and you can see now that everything has that M prefix. So I'm going to go ahead and purge my scene again. And we're going to move on to bonus settings now. Show banner section is a toggle for this top banner here, where it has the import-export buttons. If you don't need those buttons, or if you just need more window real estate, you can just turn that off. Include particle cloud materials by default is turned off, but if you need to access that material for whatever reason, you can make it show up in the list. These three options here I'll go over later. The auto append M to new materials option will do exactly what it says. If I come down here and I create a new material for this object, you can see here that it prompts me saying the M prefix will be added automatically. So if I just call this test, I'm going to hit enter, and that's going to automatically choose create and assign. We can look here and see that it automatically gave me an M underscore for the material. So if you don't want that to happen, you can just uncheck that, and then the next material I create, we'll just call this one test. You'll see that there's no prompt saying it will add an M underscore. As soon as I create this, it doesn't include that prefix. Next we have changing nameplate size, but I want to get a lot of materials in the scene before I show you that. So if we come down here and choose change nameplate size, we'll just go to the lowest, 12. And now we can really fit a lot of materials into our list without actually having to expand it vertically if we don't want to. So we're just going to change that back to its default. And then the next setting, change window width, was actually one of the most popular requests this time around. Unfortunately, you're still not able to interactively adjust the width, but now at least there's a setting where you can change it, and we can go quite wide. We'll go to 600 pixels, so we can really get the real estate that we need for extra long material names. So I'm just going to revert this. Docking, you can dock left, you can dock right, and you can have a floating window. And under the help menu, you're going to find things like the version information, how to contact me for reporting bugs, and a link to this video, as well as link to other websites where you can find this tool. Next we have the search field, which has been improved since the last version. Now as you start typing, it will start filtering immediately. And if you add a space, you can actually do multiple string searches. So if you're looking for a metal, but you want to refine that search with any metal that has a C in it, for example, I can add a C and it will be further filtered out. And I can come over and click this button here to clear my search. Below that we have the three main tabs, the current scene tab, color presets, and the ID map Baker tab. Under current scene, we have the material list area that has a list of all the materials that exist. Below that, we have counters for how many materials are on your selection and how many markers you have activated. You can see here we have 3 marked. These 4 buttons are quick material buttons. We have Lambert, Blend, Stingray PBS, and Custom. In the Custom menu, you can pick from a list of all of Maya's materials that it has to offer. On the right, we have 4 buttons that correspond with the markers. So we have duplicating, matching, renaming, and deleting. So for instance, if I wanted to delete these 3 materials that I have checked, I just click on the delete button, and those are gone now. Down here, we have 5 tools that I'll talk about in a bit, as well as the channel control and the new feature of loading from a folder. Before I go into how any of this works or the ID map maker, I want to actually talk about the color presets tab first. So just a quick overview of the color presets tab. We've got 3 main sections. One is the preset mode, one is swatches, and one is presets. You can toggle between assigning a preset to your selection or just having the preset be created and then added to the scene without being assigned to anything. This icon over here just changes the sorting order of the list from column to column to alternating columns from left to right all the way down. And you'll notice here that under the swatches, the checker pattern has been moved from where the Stingray PBS now is to here. So one of the major improvements to this tab is that this is now entirely driven by an external config file of its own. So if we open that up, we can see here we have 2 tables, one for swatches and one for all the material presets. You have control over the name, the color, and the material type as it's created. Having the presets tab read from this file allows you to customize that tab. So for example, you can remove materials that you don't use, or you can add materials that you need that you don't have yet. You can change the order, and you can actually determine what shows up as a preset and what shows up as a swatch. Swatches will always be listed at the top in the little squares here. So if I wanted to add a few new materials to this list, all I need to do is edit this table here. So I'm actually going to grab some of the materials from the presets list and I'm going to move them up to the swatches list. I'm going to save that, come back here, and I'm going to reload the material manager. And we can see now that we have those 3 materials in the swatches list. They've actually been removed from the presets list. So I'm just going to come and move that back, save, reload, and they're back where they belong. One thing to note about this system is that you have control over names and numeric color values and material types only. There isn't support yet for referencing external texture files, but this should at least give you some more versatility with your presets. And one final thing to note about the color presets tab is that the auto assign color ID tool here in the ID map maker tab relies upon how many presets you have. So if you have very few presets, then you're going to have very few color IDs automatically generated for you. So even if you don't actually have a use for all these materials, it's good to keep them in the list just so the ID map maker has more colors to pull from. So looking back at this material presets list, we have all these materials listed and loaded into the material manager here, but what you'll notice is they don't actually exist in the scene yet. This allows you the convenience of having a library of materials at your disposal, but not necessarily cluttering up your scene with having them all loaded in at the same time. So from here I'm going to move into talking about the actual material list area, but first I need some materials to work with. So I'm going to go back to my color presets and I'm just going to generate a few of these swatches here. You can see I've got my object selected, and I don't necessarily want to apply these materials to my object, so I'm going to make sure that this is add to scene, and then I'm just going to start clicking on these swatches. You can see down below it's confirming that these are being added to the scene. So I'm just going to grab a number of these, and then we'll switch back to our current scene, and you can see that these now all exist. So just some basic information about the material list area itself. The nameplates will be highlighted in blue, called indicators, which indicate what is assigned to your selection. So right now, with this object selected, we can see that just the Lambert one is assigned to this material. If I wanted to assign a different material to my object, I can choose the square button adjacent to the nameplate, and that will assign whatever I have selected. The color of the assign button is also the color of the material, which allows you to quickly zone in on certain materials if you already know what color they are. So if I'm looking for a red, I don't even have to read the label, I just see the red, and I can assign it. You can see here that the button color corresponds with the channel color. Checkboxes are called markers, and you can actually mark any number of material, and you can use these 4 buttons to perform that same action on all of your marked materials. So for example, if I wanted to rename these 4 materials, let me make sure that I don't want M underscore appended this time. If I want to rename these materials, I can just click the rename button, and it's going to prompt me however many materials I have selected. So this is cyan, I'm just going to rename it cyan, green, magenta, red, and you can see that they've all been renamed and also alphabetized. If I wanted to delete these materials, I can select them again and delete them. If you delete a material that's assigned to an object, those objects will just automatically receive a Lambert 1. So I actually want to bring those materials back, so I'm going to just grab these. And you can't double create a swatch. It will check to see if the swatch already exists, and it will just ignore your request to create a new one. Next, I wanted to talk about this bonus setting called per component material indication. By default, the material list will report what's assigned to your exact selection. So if I have this whole object selected and there's multiple materials assigned to it, for example, like this, it's going to tell me that I have these 3 materials assigned. However, if I have just a polygon assigned, it's only going to report what's assigned to that individual polygon. If you don't want this, if you want it to always be reporting what materials are assigned to your entire object, you can turn this setting off, and it will always report what's on the top level object instead of just the component. Alright, so I've gone ahead and added a number of new materials to the scene. We're going to talk about material matching next. So let's say I wanted to select everything in the scene that had this gray material assigned to it. I don't even really know what material that is, so let's kind of walk through the process of figuring all that out. So first I'm going to sort assign materials to the top, so whatever I have selected will just be at the top of the list. Next I'm going to just pick a face. Let's make sure that our per component material indication is on. So now I know that this material is chrome. What I can do from here is I can use the marker to mark that material, and then use the match tool down below to select all the polygons that have that material assigned to it, like so. Now let's say you only wanted the chrome material from just this front radio here. So what we can do is we can go to object mode, we can select the whole object. Let's find our chrome. There it is, it's still marked. And then under the bonus settings, I'm going to choose match materials on selection only. And this is off by default because it's kind of a slower process, but it still doesn't take too much time. So now I'm going to just search again, or match again. And there we go. Now just the chrome material that's on my selection was actually selected. This also works on the polygon level, so if I have just a number of faces selected, like this, I can match that. And it will actually remove everything that's not chrome from my selection. I want to mention one small thing that you might have noticed, and that's the material list title bar here. You may have seen it flash red for a moment. This bar will actually update when you have a very large selection, just to give you feedback that the tool hasn't frozen. So on high poly models, if I select a large range of polygons, it's going to take a minute to process. So this can actually cause some problems if you're making a lot of large selections. You basically have to wait for the list to update before you can make another selection. This can also slow you down if you're just trying to make a selection to assign a different material to that area. And you don't want to have to wait for the tool to catch up before you can use it. So if you click this blue button here, it'll actually suspend updating of the material list. So now I can make selections as fast as I want, and it won't try and calculate what's assigned to my selection. And next we're going to talk about this option, apply assign materials to instances. Alright, so what I have here is 3 cylinders, and they're all instances of each other. So what I do to one, it does to the other. And the way material assignment works by default in Maya is whatever you have selected, that's just what gets assigned to the object, like this. Even if the object is instanced, those instances do not receive that material assignment. However, with the apply assign materials to instances option being turned on, now whatever you apply to one instance is applied to all instances, like so. This also works on the component level as well, so I can grab a range of polygons and just assign any other color, and it will push through to all the instances. If I want to go back to affecting only my selection, I can just disable that option again. And now whatever I do to this direct selection will not affect the instances. Next we're going to go into talking about channel control, as well as a couple of tools here, including the Handedness Tool and the Harden UV Border Edge tool. So the first thing we need is a material, and I'm going to use the fairly new Stingray PBS material. So I'm going to click on this, and I'm just gonna call it PRC90. And in this name field, even if you use invalid characters like spaces or special characters, they'll just all get converted to underscores. So this allows you to more quickly kind of type out whatever you want and not get an error. When I hit enter, it's going to choose create and assign for me. And we can see there that it's now starting to respond differently. So from here, let's go ahead and add a normal map. I'm gonna go down to channel control. I'm gonna go to the normal assign button, click that. It'll automatically take me to a browser where I can find my normal file. So I'm going to open that. We can see it automatically gets assigned to the material. So the material manager is going to automatically name your texture channels for you. So if you ever find yourself in the hypershade or whatever, everything is named so you always know what things belong to in your scene. So if we look at this model, we can see that there's something kind of not quite right about it. And that's because the normal map is actually backwards for what Maya expects to use. And that's where this handedness tool comes in. If you select a model, the handedness tool will open its hand either left or right to indicate left-handed or right-handed tangent basis. This model presently is right-handed, but the normal map is left-handed. So if I just click this button, it's going to switch the mesh to a left-handed tangent basis, and now the normal map reads properly. So we can see the difference there. So next I'm just going to add the other channels very quickly. So I'm going to do color map and roughness and metallic. And just like that, we've got our material set up with all of our texture maps. And over here on the right, you can see that they're all labeled appropriately. In version 5, I've implemented a load by folder tool. So you don't have to actually click these buttons as much anymore. So let's actually do that now. I'm going to use the clear material button to just wipe all the channels, just like that. And now I'm actually going to load textures from folder instead. And this is the folder, it's already got everything in there. And I'm just going to say load from here. And all the textures automatically get loaded and renamed and everything. One thing to note about the auto load tool is that it's somewhat limited right now. It can only be used in folders where there's a single texture set for a single asset. If you try and use it in a folder that has multiple texture sets and multiple normal maps, it's going to load the first one that it finds in the directory. I'm working on ways to expand the functionality in future versions, but right now you're kind of limited to just one texture set per directory. One more thing to note about the auto load from folder tool is up in the tools menu, if you go to the help icon for that, you can actually change the suffixes that it's looking for when it searches a folder. And you'll see this button say update for this session. That's because this is temporary. These suffixes are actually derived from the config file here, as you can see. So you can set whatever kind of naming convention system that you use here and it'll look for it. I wanted to cover a tool that I sort of glazed over earlier, which was the relate option. Let's say somehow that the material name got changed to something else, like radio. Well, we can see here now that the names don't actually match what the material name is called. So if we use the cleanup option, relate file utility and shading engine names, that's going to look at the material name and it's going to give it to all of the connected inputs. So just like that, we now have radio, and then all these inputs have changed to reflect that. And same with the shading engine up here, all in one click. Next, I'm going to talk about the UV texture border tool here. This tool has been improved since the last version and now behaves more similarly to 3D Studio Max's smoothing groups. The previous version of this tool did not account for seams which belong to the same UV shell on both sides and ended up leaving those edges hard. As we can see here, running the old version of this script resulted in all of these edges being left hard. However, on a rounded surface like this, you'd want these edges to be soft. The new version of this tool takes this into consideration and will leave no hard edges on this sphere, like so. Additionally, the new UV texture border tool will respect any custom vertex normals you have set. This way you can run the tool at any time and not worry about having to redo your vertex normals. So let's go ahead and set up smoothing splits for this model. And just like that, we're done. And here's one more example for the tool to run through, just like that. And that was real time, there's no speed up there, it's pretty fast. Alright, so before we get into the ID Map Baker, there's just a few more tools that I wanted to go over, which was the Colorize, Vertex Color from Material, and the Namespace tool. So for the namespace tool, if we look over here, this object has namespaces assigned to it, and sometimes when you're importing files from ZBrush or Blender or something, they come with these namespaces that just won't seem to go away until you restart Maya. Now there's just a button. If you click on it, it's going to remove one namespace at a time. So if I click this, you'll see NS1 will disappear, and then again NS2 will disappear. If you control click this button, it'll actually bring up Maya's namespace editor window, and then you can do more advanced stuff from here. Alright, so here I have a model that has a number of materials assigned to it. The problem here is it's hard to determine where each material is assigned on this model, and it's tedious to go into each material and change the color just to find out. So this tool here, Colorize Materials, will look at every material on your object, and it will just assign it a random color. So now you can quickly visualize where those materials are showing up. The swatch of the assign button updates as well, so you can see exactly which color is corresponding to which material. If you don't like the color that was randomly generated, you can keep pressing the button to keep getting different colors. And whenever you're done, you can hold Control and click, and it'll return all your materials to a flat gray. Next, we have the Vertex Color from Material tool. What this does is it looks at the colors of the materials assigned to your model, and it converts it into Vertex Color. So I'm going to jump ahead a little bit, and I'm going to use the Auto Assign Color ID tool to give this color materials. I'm going to do by element. Alright, so now if I go back to my current scene tab, and now if I come down here and I choose this button to assign vertex colors to my model, now we have vertex colors. So if I assign just a Lambert 1 to this, you can see that the color persists because it's all in vertex color now. If I want to toggle this off, I can hold Alt and click on the button, and that will toggle vertex color on and off. And if I want to reset this, I can hold Control and click the button, and it will flood with white. I'm going to move into the ID Map Baker tab next and talk about the Auto Assign Color ID tool as well as the Baker itself. So both of these tools have had massive upgrades since version 4. Let's go ahead and take a look at the Auto Assign Color ID tool first. Right off the bat, you can see that we have two options here, by element and by object. And basically by object is going to do the entire object. So this is one object, it's going to treat that as one material ID. If we look at here, I have a high poly that's split up into parts. So each of these parts will be given their own material ID. And then here's a high poly that's just combined, so this would be one object as well. The by element option refers to any contiguously connected polygons within an object. So for example, if we look at this low poly here, that's one object. If I double click on the battery cap here, we can see that it only selects that part of the model. And that's because this section of polygons are connected to each other while they're not connected to the rest of the mesh. And this is what's considered an element. So with that, we'll just do both options just to show you the difference. So by object, this is one object, so you're going to get one color, just like that. However, by element, as I showed you, it's going to be dependent on where the polygons are separated. And this gives me more colors. This one actually gives me 12 colors. Same here for the high poly. If we do by object, we're going to get one color. But if we do by element, we're going to get far more. And this is real time, there's no speed up here. It's pretty fast. So there we go. And we can see here we have 41 different elements on this object. You can see here on the left that there's a lot of similar details that were colored different colors. And that's just based on the nature of how element separation works. If you wanted all of these screws to be the same material color, you would need to group them. So that's what I've done over here on this model, is I've split this up into parts. So like all the screws are on one object, all this sort of hard plastic stuff is on an object, the rubber is on an object, etc. So now what I can do is I can use the by object option and run it through, and it's going to treat my entire selection as different material IDs. So just like that, now we have a bunch of different colors. If we don't like the colors, we can actually change the order of the selection, run it again, and that'll give us a different result. So from here, we can use either one of these models to bake with for our actual color ID map. I'm going to use the one that's in a bunch of different parts just to show off another feature that's been included in version 5. So for this baker, the way it works is you need to have a high and a low at least. Cage is optional. We're actually not going to be using one in this video. And all you need to do to load these in to be baked is to select the objects and then click on the appropriate button for that type of object. So this is a high poly, so I'm going to click high poly meshes. You can see here that they all got loaded. It's a little hard to see, but the new feature here is this little icon that pops up that gives you a sort of listed report of everything that's being loaded to be baked. And just hit OK and it'll take you back. So now I'm going to reveal my low poly and move that back into place. I'm actually going to assign this just to Lambert. Go back to our baker, load that in as the low poly. And one thing to note before I move on is now if you close the window and reopen it, it remembers what was loaded in those slots. That was a problem in the last version where if you close the window, you'd have to reload these slots every time. If you want to clear it, you hold Control and click the button. So now I have to reload that. Simple enough. Down here you've got, you know, other basic settings, your map width and height, your pixel padding, and then your file format. I'm just going to use Targa, and then I'm going to set my file destination. I'm just going to call it Color ID. And only when you set a file destination will the bake button actually enable for you to bake. If you need to browse to this directory, there's a show and explore button that will take you right to that location that it'll be saved to. And now we can just choose bake color map. All right, that actually took about a minute or two in real time. But let's go ahead and see how it turned out. So I'm going to isolate the low poly, come over here, and I'm just going to create a new material, call it Color ID. And then I'm just going to apply that color map. There it is. Open. And there we have it. So that's a pretty successful bake, in my opinion. So that about does it for the Material Manager 5 breakdown. I want to thank you guys very much for the support and the feedback. This Material Manager wouldn't be where it is today without you guys, so I really appreciate that. And if I haven't said it before, the Material Manager has always been and always will be free, so go ahead and give it a try. And thanks for watching.